Thanks for doing this, Colin. We've spoken a few times, but there's quite a few things to cover in that you've got the recent release of the 1 year and more live box set, but also you've got a solo tour. So it'd be great to cover those two and then look back to the zombies, given that chapter certainly kind of live has drawn to a close, and other highlights from your solo journey, if okay.
Absolutely. Have you seen the box set, by the by?
There's 4 or 5 live clips that are up on YouTube that show the visual element, and they're absolutely stunning.
Oh, brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you very much. But the box, I'll just go and get it and show it to you
Yeah,
because
please.
it's quite a grand. What is that? This is what it looks like. Can you see that?
Oh, lovely.
It really is a beautiful. I can say this, I had nothing to do with putting it all together. You got a nice booklet with loads of photographs and things in. Inside, there's the DVD and two
Yeah.
CDs. It's a really lovely package.
It's taking it back to how things were over 50 years ago when you used to get the box sets. Then streaming is very convenient, but it does take away the status of the music to a certain extent. So this format elevates it to how things should be.
In a way, it does, doesn't it? If you're streaming, you just hear the one track. And I think sometimes it's quite good to hear a whole album. It can sort of change the way a track sounds when you hear it in its position on an album. And of course, then you might find that there are other tracks on the album, if you listen to it a few times, that will mean more to you than the original track that you listen to. And hopefully that will be the case with this box set.
I'm sure it will. And when I was listening to the live version of Say You Don't Mind, was it a quartet that you had?
Yeah,
The arrangement of that is absolutely beautiful. Obviously, I assume based on the original arrangement by Christopher Gunning, but there's not many artists of your generation that can still pull out the high notes like you, Colin.
well, I do work at it. I do a lot of vocal exercises to try and keep my voice in shape. Yeah, so I can still do it. Yeah, I think it's very important that I sing that song, that particular song. And there are a couple of others that are very high as well. I've been really lucky. I've kept my range.
And the setting for the concert as well, is that a former church?
It's an active church. It's
Oh,
still a
wow.
church now, but they hold lots of concerts. They hold 3 or 4 concerts a week, I think. It's a beautiful setting, wonderful atmosphere.
As you're saying, the atmosphere in a venue like that, where you've just got the surroundings that, again, elevate the occasion.
Absolutely. It makes it very, very special. And I'm glad to say that I'm touring with my solo band again in May next year. And the final show of the tour will again be at the Union Chapel. So I'm really looking forward to playing there again.
Had you played that venue before solo or with the Zombies?
I've played it as a duo with Rod Argent, just him and I. We played quite a few shows like that with just him playing piano and me singing. And of course, Rod's a really fine harmony singer, so that lifts it a bit. And we definitely played the Union Chapel with just the two of us. That was a great experience again.
Take us back to the run up to 1 year, because I think that's your debut LP.
It was my first solo album, yeah.
What was the aim as a solo artist with that record?
Well, I can't say there was an overall plan when we first got together. The really great thing for me was that there is a difference between being a lead singer in a band and being a solo artist. There's all sorts of little nuances that are different. You have to make a lot more decisions. It's a lot more responsibility. And so I was really fortunate that album was produced by Rod Argent and Chris White from the Zombies. We went back to Abbey Road where we recorded the last Zombies album, Odyssey and Oracle. We're actually in Studio 3, the same studio, with Peter Vince, who was one of the engineers on Odyssey and Oracle. So in some respects, this album was getting the old team back together again. We did do a few sessions outside of Abbey Road, but the crux of it was recorded there, and it was all mixed there. But it was pretty much, to a large extent, make it up as we went along, because we had 2 tracks to start with. She Loves the Way They Love Her and Misty Roses. They were the only 2 tracks we had to start with. And then during the year, obviously it took a year to record, that's why it's called 1 year. various songs were written and became available. Beautiful songs like her song, Chris White's song. There's just lots of Misty Roses by Tim Harding. Oh, we started with that, Misty Roses with Tim Harding. I was lucky enough to write 4 of the songs myself, actually, that were written during the year. But I just want to emphasize that there wasn't a plan when we started it. I think maybe the cornerstone of this recording is being introduced to Chris Gunning, such a wonderful, imaginative arranger. And he actually presented arrangements on 6 of the tracks. And they're totally unique. I haven't heard anything like it before. And this was recorded probably in 1970. It was released in 71. I haven't heard anything like it before or anything like it since. And Chris Gunning's, these arrangements just made everything sound so different. And particularly Say You Don't Mind. Not many people know that we did actually try and record it as a rock and roll song first, but it didn't work. And then we asked Chris to have a go at it. And that's the version that you hear now. It's a 21-piece string orchestra. It's not a string quartet, which is what we had at the Union Chapel. But to get a 21-string orchestra on the Union Chapel stage would cost an absolute fortune. So it's the Q strings. They're a wonderful quartet. And I think they performed it really, really well. And actually, Dave Bainbridge, the keyboard player in the solo band, was adding some bass notes as well, which seemed to work really well from his keyboard. He was adding some bass notes because obviously there was a bass part on the original record. And it came together really well.
Did that set the tone, your version of Say You Don't Mind? Because there's a few artists in the late 60s that had that inspiration to draw on orchestration. Denny Lane being one of them with his electric string band. Was kind of your take on that, but then making it your own, one of those elements to get a new sound for you?
It wasn't really, to be honest. It's just something that naturally evolved while we were recording the album. We weren't being influenced by anyone. And that's kind of true of the Zombies and of my solo career. We've never followed trends. It's quite a simple process, really, with the Zombies and my solo band, is putting together the 10 best songs you've got and recording it to the best of your ability. That's what we've always done. It sounds a bit oversimplified, but that is it.
But it was a natural thing in the way things branched out in the 70s. You had Argent, which had a bit more of a progressive and rockier edge, whereas your solo career was a more songwritery, a little bit of orchestration at times, a few more ballads compared to Argent.
That's right. I mean, it was just a natural thing. Rod particularly wanted to push things as far as he could in making things more edgy and more tough, whereas I was more content with just singing good songs. And that sounds so easy. To find good songs or to write good songs is not easy. And I was really lucky because there were songs like I Don't Believe in Miracles, Andorra, that were offered to Argent first, because Don't Believe in Miracles was written by Russ Ballard, who was in Argent, and Andorra was written by Chris White, who was a co-producer of Argent. But I think they felt they weren't really edgy enough. They weren't tough enough for the band. And so I got the chance to record them myself. And both of them were hits in their own way. Andorra was a hit in Europe. It wasn't a hit here. Don't Believe in Miracles was a hit here and in Europe. So I was quite fortunate because there were some great songwriters in Argent. Rod Argent, Chris White, and Russ Ballard. And I got some of their songs that they felt weren't right for Argent, as well as writing a lot of the songs myself, of course.
I assume you were a fan of Tim Hardin.
I was a big fan of Tim Hardin, yeah, and I couldn't believe that no one had covered Misty Roses. To me, it was a standout track on that album. Some people might not agree because Rod Stewart had a huge hit with another track on that album, Reason to Believe. So obviously it's a great song, but the track that struck me was Misty Roses. He's a great singer-songwriter, Tim Hardin.
You also mentioned about your own material, and Caroline Goodbye is a great example. Were you cautious in terms of releasing material that was related to your personal circumstances?
Well, I'm not overcautious. That one in particular, I used a real name with the idea for everyone concerned of changing the name to make it a little bit less obvious. But the recording date sort of came up faster than I expected. And I couldn't think of another name. So in the end, I threw caution to the wind and recorded it with the real name, thinking that no one except my close friends would know. But in fact, there was a journalist who wrote for the Daily Express that knew the story, and it didn't come from me, and wrote quite a big, whole page story about the background to that song, and the secret was out. I would have never talked about it in personal terms myself, just in case it would upset anybody. It wasn't meant to upset anyone, I have to say, but perhaps it is a bit personal. And anyway, the secret's out now, so, and has been for many years. It's been up for about 50 years. So hopefully no one's too upset about it now.
You went on tour, and I think you were, was it Support or on the same bill as ELO? So
Yes,
interesting string combination there.
absolutely. Yeah. It was ELO's first tour, and it was my first tour as well. And yeah, we both featured strings. So I think it went quite well together. I had a string quintet, and I played half a rock and roll set and half string songs, which was very interesting.
How much Zombies material did you feature at that time?
It's hard for me to remember, to be honest. It's a long time ago. But I would imagine I did She's Not There in Time of the Season. People like to hear hits, so I do usually play those songs. Ironically, with this new live DVD and CD, I haven't played any of the zombie hits in this particular concert. And that's because the concert run started with a Zombies festival called Begin Here in St. Albans. It's a weekend festival. And I played on the Friday night. I played this 1 year set, knowing that we were going to do a zombie set on the Saturday night. And as a lot of the people come for the weekend, I knew they would come to Friday and Saturday. So on the Friday, I purposely didn't include there's one obscure zombie song in there, but not She's Not There in Time of the Season, another track that I knew the Zombies wouldn't be playing on Saturday. So people might be quite surprised when they hear this 1 year concert that there's no zombie songs in there at all. Usually I would play the hits, but in this instance it wasn't possible.
And of course, you'd previous to that, you'd released singles with a pseudonym. What was the factor of now going under your own name? Was it just a bit too obvious?
I'll tell you the honest truth. There's a bit of a mystery about this, really, because the tracks that I did 3 singles under the name of Neil MacArthur, and they were produced by a wonderful producer called Mike Hurst. And I don't think either of us are too sure why we used another name, and why I had nothing to do with choosing the name Neil MacArthur. That was presented to me, definitely. Maybe I was a bit wary of using my real name because the first single was proposed to be a cover version of She's Not There. So that might have had something to do with it. So I released 3 singles, and then it was decided that I would record with Chris White and Rod Argent under my real name. I don't think I was ever going to stay with Neil MacArthur. It was just a strange adventure that I had along the way.
For Ennismore, your second solo album, other than Don't Believe in Miracles, that's basically your own material. So by then you must have felt much more confident as a songwriter.
Yeah, I think I did. I lived in a flat in Ennismore Gardens with a wonderful singer-songwriter called Duncan Brown and his manager, who's called Patrick Lacey. And we all played guitar, and we used to stay up all night playing guitar and sharing ideas. And I think because of that, I suddenly found I could write songs more easily than I could before, because we were just playing so much. And that's the reason that I called that album Ennismore, because that flat that we shared was in Ennismore Gardens. And there's a little note on the back. I think it's something like Ennismore was the first to listen, or something like that. And it just felt that in that flat that we shared, for the first time, people were really listening to my songs. And it sort of gave me the freedom to write more and more songs.
and great songs as well. And it's hard to decide in terms of those first two albums. Some people prefer Ennismore, some people prefer 1 Year.
I think they do. Yeah, I think they are both quite strong, those albums. And from what I can gather, they're probably people's favourite albums of mine. And some people, yeah, favour 1 Year, and some people favour Ennismore.
Do you think you'd ever do Ennismore live, given the success of doing 1 Year?
Um, I haven't thought about it so far, but never say never.
I wanted to go back to the Zombies, and one of the interesting things looking back is that originally in the predecessor of the Zombies, you were on rhythm guitar. Did that last long?
It didn't last all that long. It's when we were amateurs. By the time we were a professional band, I didn't play guitar at all. But I joined the Zombies as a rhythm guitarist. And in our very first rehearsal, first of all, I realized what a good keyboard player Rod was. He was going to be the lead singer. He wasn't going to play keyboards. In a coffee break, he went over to a broken down old piano and he played Nut Rocker by B. Bumble and the Stingers. And, it's a rock and roll take on a classical piece. And he was such a wonderful player, even at 15. We were 15 when we first got together. But he didn't want to play keyboards. He felt it wouldn't be a rock and roll band. At that time, he wanted it to be all guitars. But then at the end of that first rehearsal, I was putting my guitar away and I just sang a Ricky Nelson song. We remember it as It's Late. I think that's what it was. And Rod was taken with the way I sang it. And he said, I'll tell you what, if you'll be the lead vocalist, which was not my intention at all, if you'll be the lead vocalist, I'll play keyboards. And essentially that was how the Zombies came together. There was only one change. The bass player left. He wanted to be a doctor. We were all at school at this time. The bass player wanted to be a doctor, and his studies didn't really allow him the rehearsal time to be a member of the band. And so he left and Chris White joined. And that was very early on. And that was the Zombies.
I've also read that Rod was influenced in terms of the sort of vocal arrangement of She's Not There, almost writing for your voice. Is that how things happened?
Well, Rod's always said that he's always written with my voice in mind. I guess it's because we grew up together. We went through our formative years. Rod will sometimes say that he learned how to write songs for my voice. And I think I can say the same thing. I learned how to sing professionally to Rod's songs. He's very particular about how his songs are sung. And I learned an awful lot about phrasing from him. I was a very unsophisticated vocalist, and he taught me so much about phrasing when we were recording his songs. So it sort of worked two ways. He would say he learned how to writing for my voice, and I learned how to singing his songs.
How did you find going over to the United States? Because I think She's Not There ultimately was a bigger hit over there than even in the UK.
It was, actually. There were two charts then, national charts. One of them doesn't exist anymore, but Cashbox, the one that unfortunately doesn't exist anymore, She's Not There went to #1 in Cashbox. I think it was #2 or 3 in Billboard. So really big hit. And it was a big hit around the world as well. So we went from playing local gigs in and around St. Albans to touring around the world, which was, looking back, it was a huge jump to make. But when you're young, you don't question these things. We were 18 and 19 years old. We just did it. Really exciting going to the States. It's the home of jazz, the blues, rhythm and blues, rock and roll. It's where everything started. And I think all British musicians long to play in America, to just mix with those musicians and go to those venues where so many wonderful songs were written, performed, and new movements were started, rock and roll, the blues, and so forth. So it was incredible for us. We played the Murray the K's Christmas show. It was a big, big show at the time at the Brooklyn Fox. And as was the way things were done in those days, there were about 14 or 15 acts on the show. So the Shangri-Las, Patti LaBelle, Benny King, lots of wonderful, the Shirelles, were on this show, and I think it started at about 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning.
Really?
Then it just went through the day, but each artist only did a couple of songs, and then the next artist came on, and then at the end of the show they would play a short film, and in theory everyone was supposed to leave the theatre, and the next lot of people came in, but a lot of people stayed all day. It was absolutely ram-packed every day for 10 days. So that was our first show. And we had to follow Patti LaBelle with her band at the time. It was Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells. We had to follow her every show. And I don't know if people realize how big Patti LaBelle is in the States. She's huge. And it was a bit intimidating to follow her, but it went really well. It was fine.
And go back to She's Not There. I'd say compared to some of the singles of your peers, it's an incredibly mature sounding record that is timeless.
Yes.
What is it about that track? It's obviously putting a lot of adverts and films, TV, and you don't necessarily think purely about the 60s. It can work today.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the great things about really good writing, is that it does have a timeless feel about it. That track sounds as fresh and as relevant today as it did when it was recorded. And it's just wonderful writing. I think Rod is an incredible writer. Later on, I found out he'd written a couple of songs before, but as far as I knew, and as far as the public really knows, that was his first song ever. To write that so early in your career, it's just incredible. And of course, it's been covered by Santana and many other artists. And as you rightly said, it's in so many commercials, TV shows, and films. A lot of zombie materials in films and commercials, which is it's very rewarding to realize that people still feel these tracks have a relevance 50 and 60 years after they were recorded.
Were you inspired by Rod, and then Chris was writing as well? Just Out of Reach is actually one of your own compositions.
Yes, I was very much inspired by them. They were both quite sophisticated writers and quite prolific writers. And yeah, it really encouraged me to start writing myself. I never thought in a million years I could write a song. I thought writers were from a completely different kind of the business. But of course, in a way, the Beatles changed all that when they started writing their own material. And so I decided to try and write something. I think the first song I wrote was How We Were Before, I think possibly was the first song, which went on a B-side. And then Just Out of Reach went into a film. Laurence Olivier and Carol Linley starred in an Otto Preminger film. And that song went into it, that film. It's called Bunny Lake is Missing.
You had a few years where you didn't have a lot of hits, certainly here in the UK as well, albeit internationally. I don't know if you knew at the time, you were still charting. How was that period before Odyssey and Oracle?
Well, it was challenging. I think as a band, we concentrated too much on the UK and US charts. But remember, this is a time before the internet, and you often didn't know where songs were hits for months, could even be years afterwards when you caught up with the news from, say, the Far East or even Eastern Europe. What we realized after the band had finished was that for the whole time the band was working professionally from 64 to 67, we always had a hit record somewhere, always. We had a period where we didn't have hits in the UK and the States. And as I said, I think we paid too much attention to that because we were having hits. And then, of course, 18 months after the band finished, there was a huge hit in America. It was our biggest hit, actually, Time of the Season, and there was no band. And it was decided, probably rightly, that we wouldn't reform the band because everyone was involved in different projects by that time.
Had you got much of your own compositions around the period of Odyssey and Oracle, or was it just clear that the material that Chris and Rod had would fit that particular project?
No, it wasn't until after Odyssey and Oracle that I started to really write songs. Just those two songs that the Zombies recorded were about all I'd written. And then afterwards, particularly when I was living at this flat in Ennismore Gardens, I started to write a lot of songs, and hence they made it onto the Ennismore album. So it was around 69, 70, 71 is when I first started to write lots of songs.
You've been doing quite a lot of promotion in relation to Odyssey and Oracle this year because there's been a mono reissue or remaster of that particular album as well. Some tracks that don't necessarily get the attention that they deserve, like Changes, the harmonies on that. It is a chance to spotlight some of those tracks that don't necessarily get picked out.
Absolutely. Changes is the only track that everyone in the band sang on. So all five of us are singing on that. And you rightly point out that harmonies are a striking feature of that track. And I think hearing it in mono, which is the way it was originally recorded, does give a different dimension to the listening experience. And of course, if you get the vinyl copy of mono, that probably enriches it as even more. It is really refreshing to hear it, I think, remastered in mono. I think it's quite a striking album. I really do. Of course, it wasn't recognized as anything particularly interesting at the time. It was mostly ignored by the media, except for wonderful DJ Kenny Everett loved it, and there was one journalist called Penny Valentine in Disc who also really liked it. But otherwise, the media in this country and America pretty much ignored it. But then over the years, I think basically through word of mouth, Rolling Stone at one time named it as one of the top 100 albums of all time. It's always been in their top 500 albums. And if you think how many albums are released every week, to be in Rolling Stone's top 500 albums is incredible. And it really never charted anywhere. I looked it up once. It was 98 for 1 week in Billboard. And yet nowadays it's named as a classic album. It's quite an interesting phenomenon.
It is quite remarkable. I guess you've got a group that, although commercially at the time, almost at the end, possibly, but you honed yourself playing live over a period. I think you rehearsed a lot of the material before you went into Abbey Road, as well as just being at Abbey Road, which for me has produced, especially through the Beatles, some of the most beautifully sounding records ever made.
Absolutely. I think at that time, Abbey Road was quite possibly the best studio in the world. It certainly was the best studio in this country. We managed to get into, I've never worked out how we did, because Abbey Road was called EMI Studios at that time. And the clues in the name, EMI Studios, only recorded EMI artists. But we were on CBS, so I'm not quite sure how we managed to get in there, but I'm eternally grateful that we did, because their engineers were wonderful. And Peter Vince and Jeff Emmerich, who worked on Odyssey and Oracle, just did a great job. And I think that over the years, I was just thinking about people have learned about Odyssey and Oracle through word of mouth, but in this country, Paul Weller has been a huge advocate of Odyssey and Oracle and is to this day. And in America, the late great Tom Petty was another one who was always talking about Odyssey and Oracle and the Zombies, the band. I think he saw the Zombies before he ever had a band, and they were one of the reasons he wanted to form a band. And I remember that concert that I didn't meet him at that concert, but I remember the concert he came to, and it impressed him so much that he wanted to start a band. So those two guys have really helped Odyssey and Oracle to the prominence that it now enjoys.
Was Alan Parsons involved in a junior capacity in that period? Because obviously you went on to work with him much more in the 1970s.
Of course, Alan Parsons has gone on to be one of the most revered producers in the world. But at the time of Odyssey and Oracle, he was an assistant engineer at Abbey Road. He was learning his craft.
Is that literally just pushing the button or putting the reels on?
A lot of the time, I think it was. But obviously, you're expected to learn. You're not going to stay doing that forever. I'm sure he did engineer some sessions as well, but with us, he was always an assistant engineer with us. But he obviously learned through doing that and just became the most wonderful first engineer, and then secondly producer. Hugely respected producer in the world. But yeah, he worked on Odyssey and Oracle. He's worked on so many huge albums, Alan Parsons. It's incredible. Dark Side of the Moon, and a lot of the Beatles albums, and many, many big albums.
Had you much contact at the time, or was it that you built up your relationship in the 70s, or did he think of you when he was working on with Eric Woolson on the Alan Parsons project?
Well, we did know one another through working together at Abbey Road, but also we realised we live quite close to one another as well. So on a weekend, I would sometimes see him in the Flask in Hampstead Village, because we both lived near Hampstead Village. I lived in West Hampstead at the time. And so I would see him up at the Flask. So we knew one another. And then when he started putting the project together. He tried to contact me for the first album, Tales of Mystery and Imagination, but I was actually living in California at the time. So when I came back to the UK, he approached me for the second album, which was called Pyramid, and I recorded a song called The Eagle Will Rise Again, beautiful song, on their second album. And then I recorded on 3 or 4 other albums after that. The one that people remember, I think, is Old and Wise, which is on Eye in the Sky. And I usually play that in concert as well.
It's a bit of a tearjerker, that track. It's just full of emotion.
It's an incredibly emotional song and recording, and I can sense it in the audience. I certainly feel it myself when I perform it, but I can sense it in the audience as well, that people do feel that song. The lyric to that song is very moving.
What was the rationale or the things that brought together the Keats project? Because that's almost an extension of the Alan Parsons project.
I think that was always Eric Woolson's vision, Keats. He thought it would be a really good idea to get the guys that had played on the early Alan Parsons albums. He thought it'd be a great idea to have them perform as a band, and he approached me to be lead vocalist. I was very honoured that he thought of me in those terms. It was great fun to do.
Was it that it just wasn't as commercially successful as it potentially should have been? Was one of the factors where it was only one album, I think?
Yeah, I guess the commercial side of things always has a bearing, doesn't it? It was a strange series of events, because that was recorded for EMI America, and they did actually ask for a second album, but then they changed their mind. It was very difficult to keep up. Yes, we want a second album, and then what happens is a change of management in the company, change of personnel, and they decided that they wanted to try something fresh. So I thought we were going to do a second album, and then EMI decided not to do that. All these commitments are very fragile. You never know what's going to happen until it actually happens. And Keats is a very good example. We all thought we were going to record a second album, and at the last minute it was taken away from us.
Some of the songs that you've written have been recorded by other artists. Do you have any favourites? Something that I wasn't aware of until recently is actually Roger Daltrey has done one of your songs, Single Man's Dilemma, for example.
That's right. Well, I think he did a really good version of it. Slightly changed the lyric in it, but I think it all works. And also, just off the top of my head, Dusty Springfield did a really good version of a song called Exclusively for Me, which I really like. But there have been other covers as well, but they're the two that come to mind.
I've heard Dusty's version, but it's kind of a really good fit. I don't know if you guys ever would have done a duet or something, because your vocal styles would have worked perfectly together.
Yeah, I think they possibly could have. We did tour. The Zombies did tour with Dusty Springfield very early on, and she was a wonderful artist. I think at the time she was underestimated, because she was very, very special. It's so sad that she died so young.
One of the other facts as well around the Zombies is that you had a good 20 years playing live, recording, getting acclaim. That must have been quite a nice thing given what had happened in the 1960s.
Well, it was. I always call it the second incarnation of the Zombies, and we first got together in 1999. But I don't think either Rod or myself knew how much people valued the Zombies repertoire. Because when we first started, we weren't playing very many zombie tunes, but it soon became apparent that people wanted to hear zombie tunes. And over a period of time, we added more and more zombie tunes until it only seemed natural to call the band the Zombies. It didn't happen immediately. It was 5 or 6 years before we did that. But it was a surprise, but it was a wonderful surprise that we had the extra 20 years from 1999 until last year. More, well, it's 25 years actually. And I feel really lucky that we were allowed that sort of reprise to our original career. It was brilliant. We built it up from absolutely nothing, just playing the smallest venues you could imagine, until we played, I mean, in this country, we played all the big festivals, and we headlined at the Palladium and played at the Albert Hall. And in America, we played at, well, all the big venues, the Greek Theatre in Los Angeles. I can't remember what they're all called. Like names are not my strong point, but we played all the big venues. And it was really great to get this opportunity the second time around.
It was really nice that you had your touring band of the Zombies, but then you reunited the living members of the Zombies for the Odyssey and Oracle shows, and it seemed very much like a family and friendly affair.
It was. The original plan was just to do it once at the Shepherd's Bush Empire, but it proved so popular that one show grew into 3 shows. And Paul Weller came every night to that. And then the next year we did it round the country. And then the next year we took it to America. It was only going to be one show, but we ended up doing it for a few years, actually, particularly in America. We did it with, we toured with Brian Wilson, the Brian Wilson Band. And I really wanted him to do Pet Sounds, but he didn't want to do Pet Sounds. We did Odyssey and Oracle, and he just did an evening of Beach Boy classic songs. But I thought it would have been great if he'd done Pet Sounds. But that was a wonderful experience.
And then with Rod now not doing live tours, it also presents an opportunity for you and your solo work, and you've got the Believe in Miracles UK tour.
Yeah.
One door closes, but another one opens for your solo work.
Well, I mean, in a way, but I've always kept the solo band going. It's just a difference of emphasis, really. My focus was on the Zombies. And when there was a break in the Zombies touring diary, I would tour with my solo band. Now the Zombies are not going to tour anymore. So the focus is now wholly on the solo band. And I'm really looking forward to that UK tour.
You're working on or maybe it's already been recorded, I think there's a plan for a solo album next year. Is that correct?
Hopefully so, yeah. We're recording some tracks and with the idea of making it into a solo album.
And is that a mix of your own material? And
it's all going to be all my own material.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
All 10 tracks, yeah.
Have you done that before in terms of...
No, I haven't. I thought it was about time that I did it. I didn't want to rush it, you know.
You almost got there with Ennismore, but...
I know. I think I did about 7 or 8 of the songs on Ennismore, but this time it's going to be all me. So... That's interesting. So
a lot to look forward to, potentially an album and tour, and also the 1 year and more box set that we discussed at the start as well. So it would make a good Christmas present, I would say.
I think it would, yes. If anybody is interested in seeing that DVD of the 1 year album, it is available now. I think you can go to Gonzo Distribution, and if you put Gonzo Distribution and then put Colin Blunstone DVD, that will bring it up.
Fantastic, Colin. It's been great to speak to you again, and all the best with that release and the tour.
Cheers. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed having a chat. Thank you.
Take care, Colin.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.